If you're a fan of Wholesome Romance, then today's episode of Go and Be is for you. We have asked questions of readers of Wholesome Romance and non-readers alike, and we are here with Esther Hatch to get the answers to those questions.
Join us today on Go and Be. Hello and welcome to Go and Be. I am Michelle McCullough. We are joined by Christy Gardner and our guest today, who is Esther Hatch. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We are so excited to have this conversation today. Esther is a wholesome romance novelist who is also a mother and specializes in some amazing things. And we're going to dive into a little bit about her history in just a minute. But we have a show for you today that is going to be interesting because we're going to be talking a little bit about what she does, but then also why she does it.
So, Esther writes wholesome romance. So when you hear the phrase wholesome romance, what do you think and what comes to your mind, Esther?
To me, it means, oh gosh, I should have written this down, but somebody recently posted like a short thing for like heat level, and she based it on what you would be comfortable giving to your grandma. And I cannot remember the exact phrase she used, but it was so cute. And that's basically what it is. It's romance that gives you all the feels, but also it's something you could give to your daughters, you could give to your grandma, and you could feel very comfortable with them reading it, and you don't have to blush or anything.
I do have to say it depends on the grandma, because after my grandma passed, we found some pretty steamy romance novels in her house.
And notice I say grandma, not mother, because I grew up with steamy romances in our house too. So
Well, we're so excited you're here today. So what led you to becoming an author? Because we read a little bit about you before you came, and we were really interested to know that you actually started going to writing conferences and doing the things that writers do before you ever thought you would be a writer.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, tell us a little bit about that.
So for me, it was a little bit different. I have a sister-in-law that wrote first, and I feel like I started writing as a way to be a part of her writing story. We started a writing club. She was going to conferences and I would tag along, but I wasn't serious about writing yet.
Because you were an architect, is that right?
I was an archaeologist.
Archaeologist,
yeah. Not quite the same thing, but close.
Not at all the same thing, but sounds the
Usually
same.
I get paleontologist, but no, I was an archaeologist, but I really had put all of that on hold and just was a stay-at-home mom for, I don't know, 10, 20, 15 years. I know. I said it and I thought, oh, shoot, I did not mean to say just. I just meant like I wasn't working as an architect or an archaeologist. But so I was staying at home. We had 4 beautiful children. My youngest was very, very sick for a long time, for 3 years. And I was so zoned in on that. And I remember one day, so I had been writing on and off and on with my sister-in-law and some other sister-in-laws. We did like a writing group. And I actually did finish a book. It took me about 2 years, and it's like a fantasy novel, and it's a mess. And the day I finished it, I had been just totally absorbed with my son for years, and I just remember praying and being like, I need to pray for something else. It wasn't even like I need to pray for me. It was, I need to pray for something else besides my son for once. And I got this overwhelming feeling that I needed to write. And so I started my first novel, The Roses of Fieldstone, like the next day, and wrote it instead of 2 years. It took me 2 months, and then a lot of editing too. So 2 months to do the first draft, and that kind of started me on my actual, I would say, my writing journey. And then I was very grateful to have gone to the conferences and had this great support group, and I could just kind of take off once I was ready.
So tell us a little bit about how, you have focused on a little bit more historical. You don't do present day, you do Victorian.
Yeah. Yes, Victorian.
So what made you drawn to that time period, and have you stayed there, aside from your fantasy novel? What makes you drawn to this time period specifically?
Well, I actually wanted to write one of these when I started my fantasy novel, and I felt like the research was just going to be overwhelming. I love to read them. I love to read the classics that were written in that time period, but I decided it would be too hard to get everything right, and so I made up my own world. Well, little did I know when I was writing like the fantasy novel, that part was actually still hard to make a world. And the part that I really loved was the romance. And the part that I feel bad to this day that the world will not get to read is the romance that was in that book. So I thought, I'm just going to stick to romance, and if I have to research, I have to research, and it'll be fine. So, yeah.
Awesome. So you write powerful women, which I think is fun to read about, but tell us about what you go into creating a character and a woman that you feel connected to so that you can tell her story.
Yeah. So I love that you say that I write powerful women, because I feel like I do, but I also feel like it's important to stay true to the environment that woman was raised in. And so usually I feel like my women are kind of outliers in their society, but not in a way that I feel like would be unnatural, or like you're taking what we consider to be a strong, powerful woman today and laying that on somebody who lived in a time when, if you got married, all your assets became your husband's. So it's kind of like you have to put a strong woman in an environment that really makes it tricky. But I really, to my core, believe that there were strong women back then, but they maybe looked a little bit different than how we view them now.
Right, and you have to have this integrity for the time period, but also integrity for how you want women presented in the world.
Yeah.
So exactly. Who is your favorite character? I know it's like asking you who your favorite kid is, right?
Hard. Yeah, I have, I usually make a list when somebody asks that. I wrote a Christmas, Regency in a novella collection.
Because Regency is different than Victorian, and a lot of people don't know that distinction.
I say just a little bit, and all the authors are cringing, but yes, they are different. Regency is before Victorian. They're based on who was ruling in England at the time. So Regency is when they had a regent on the throne, and Victorian is when Victoria was on the throne. So Victorian is a huge, huge time period, and I write pretty early Victorian, usually 1845, 1850, whereas Regency takes place kind of in the 18 teens, time period. Yeah.
So tell us about this Christmas character.
Oh, yes. So probably his name is Charles, and I actually wrote him first in my very first book, The Roses of Feldstone, which is also Regency. And he was married and had children in that book, but his wife's dynamic and their family dynamic, I just fell in love with writing it. And so I actually went back and wrote their romance story beforehand. And he was just like such a fun, out-of-the-box character. And so to this day, I wish I could write all my main male characters kind of like Charles, because it just made everybody laugh. So,
I love that. And isn't it fun? It's like going on a vacation and visiting long-lost friends when you get to revisit the characters that you wrote before.
Yeah, it was so fun. And then the other one I would say is Patience from A Proper Charade, kind of for the same reason. She's just kind of quirky, out of the box, and it's easy to write a scene with her and make it fun. So, yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk about Patience for a minute, and then we're going to talk about a specific part that I read that I really loved. But tell us about her, because she is a unique character. And not only is she a powerful woman, but she's trying to figure out how she fits in a society that wants her to be a specific way. And so what kinds of thoughts or ideas do you have about this character that you feel like are parallel to things that women are doing today? And how did you feel like this journey could be a representation of what other women can use or take to kind of figure out how they fit in the world?
Yeah. Well, one thing I love about Patience is she wants to prove herself to her family. Her family's gone through some hard times, and she just kind of was left at home to sit and do nothing, because that was kind of her job, which honestly and historically accurate. She was the sister of a duke. She probably would have been going through a lot of training. But for this family, I felt like they kind of were on hiatus of everything because of a death in the family. So her brother just didn't like that she was not very productive, and she felt like, well, how can I be? You don't let me go out in society. Mom isn't here. And so she decides she's going to spend just 1 month proving herself to her family. And she dresses up as a maid and goes to stay in a household of the one man in London that her brother really, really respects, which is a general. And so I just love this feeling that she has of people are telling me I'm one way. I'm going to go prove that I can be something else. But then she gets in that situation, and she also discovers who she really is, and that she's helpful and she wants to take care of others and she wants to make connections with others. And so it's a fun book. So
What I love about her journey is that a lot of this fictions that we go back and see, like even from Cinderella, symbolically, they're moving up in a society or trying to fit into a higher class, if you will. But in this case, she takes herself down into a different place to try to prove that she can do these other things. And you see glimpses of them saying, how do you know about this? Or what do you know? And like, so she kind of is trying to hide and hide some of those pieces. But I love that humility that comes from that in the sense of proving, but then she learned some things along the way too. Okay, but I have to tell you my favorite part.
Okay, you ready? I'm ready for this.
We read this morning and we were all blown away.
I'm like, everybody stop. I really love this. We're going to talk about it. I mean, there's some very fun romance in here. There's a little kissing thing that was actually quite interesting. It happens close to this, okay? But so she works for Mr. Woodsworth, right?
Yeah.
And he says to her, I'm sorry you have such a serious and lifeless employer. I never understood why I couldn't be serious about my work and about planning a future for myself and also be a compelling, enjoyable person. But apparently I can't. Shouldn't a person be able to be both? I love that question. Can we be serious and enjoyable? It's funny because that's basically the question she's asking herself, or she's trying to prove to other people. Can I be enjoyable and can I have a little bit of a serious side, but do I have to only be serious? But then she takes that introspection and she says, something deep inside Patience stilled. Mr. Woodsworth was right. A person should be able to be both. She had been working so hard to kill off the fun-loving part of herself, when in reality, she could become more serious and still be young, free, and happy. And I just love this question. And so I love the pieces of this in terms of how do we, especially as women who have all these pieces of us, how do we embrace multiple pieces or even two pieces instead of just saying, do I have to be this serious put together woman all the time? Why can't I be somebody who knows how to put myself together and also knows how to let it go or relax or whatever? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I had no clue what you were going to pick, but I'm so glad you picked that one. It's actually one of the first scenes I wrote in the book. So
yay! And you don't write chronologically.
I mostly do, but I have snippets that I think of first that give me like the heart of the book, I feel like. And that scene and the kiss that comes after it really is the heart of this novel. And when I was about 40% done writing it chronologically, I was feeling really discouraged about it and was just like, I don't know if people are going to believe these characters. They're more like quirky, I would say, than a lot of mine. And I was feeling discouraged. I wasn't sure if it was going to work. And I went back to my notes and I read my outline for that scene. And I immediately went like, this book is going to work. And it reminded me what I was trying to show, like the theme, and that their romance was going to work too, and why these two people were perfect for each other. So, which is the heart of a romance, even though I do love to put wonderful things like that in it too. But so for me, I feel like I've forgotten your original question.
But it's just the thought of, can I be both?
Can you be both? Yes. And I feel like that's something, like you said, for women, it's hard. It's hard to have multiple hats. But I do really feel like we can. And a good friend of mine just posted like, people who feel like we do everything, we probably don't. What we're probably doing is taking turns doing things and rotating them. And today I'm going to focus a lot on my family because I've been at a hotel for the last 2 days trying to finish a book. So I think like it's one of those things that you can maybe not do everything, but you can do some things and you can do them well. And this is where I wish I would have brought notes, but I just read a quote from a very famous person in history who said, and maybe we can add this later, I wish I could attribute it, but I cannot remember. He said, if I contradict myself, I contradict myself. I am infinite, or something like that. And I can't remember what it was, but I feel like that. We are all infinite. We can be serious. We can be fun. We can be moms. We can be writers. We can think one way one day, and then a different day the next. And it's okay to contradict yourself. It's okay to have more than one thought in your head about certain things.
Here are two things I'm loving about your story. The first one is the thought that writing a romance novel isn't just writing a romance novel, that it's depth and that we can take our creativity and this fun part of your life and you can use it to find depth and to connect. And I think some people who aren't used to reading romance, I'm a nonfiction girl, I don't usually read romance, but to think that I could have gems like that that would give me wisdom and insight, make me want to read it. So that's the first part of the story I love. The second part of your story that I really love and I'd like your thoughts on, do you find it fascinating that in your hardest time with your son and in what was going on in your life, that God opened a way for you to be creative and gave you this gift? It's not something you went to school in. It's not something you ever planned for yourself, but it was almost this gift to allow you space to have something else. What do you think about that?
I've thought about that a lot over the years. And for the first year or two, I felt like Heavenly Father was remembering me, like not me as a mom, not me as my son's mom that needed to take care of him all the time, but remembering me and that I needed to
as
find
a woman.
Me again. Yes, as a woman. And I needed things. I needed some other things. It's been an interesting process as I'm a few years down the road now. And once again, like at first it was all exhilarating and I felt like it was all a blessing. And now it's getting to the point where it is hard sometimes to do it. And maybe it's not as exhilarating. It has become a career where I have to work and I have to work hard. And suddenly that I'm like, did I understand you correctly? Is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? And I think that's where this quote about I contradict myself. Like I think at the beginning, I felt like I will always be able to do this and it'll always be fun and it'll always be the right choice. And I feel like now a few years into it, if I have to step away, I could. I don't think I will. I really do love it. But like giving yourself that permission to say seasons. Like, to have seasons. And maybe at first it was always exhilarating, but now it's sometimes exhilarating and it's sometimes devastating, and that's okay too. And if you guys both write and you know what it's like, there are some times when a book comes out or different things where you probably wonder, is this worth it? Like you get a bad review and I love reviews. I'm not trying to bash on people who give reviews. Please do review books. But you question and it's hard, or you're just stressed and you worry. And so it's been good for me to come to a point where I can say like, this career is evolving and I'm evolving with it, and it's been fun.
I love that.
Yeah.
So I've got a couple of different directions I want to go, but I do want to ask you, for someone who is new to this genre and they do read other things, nonfiction, or maybe they're mystery novels or fantasy, what would you say would be an invitation or a reason that you would love someone to give the wholesome romance genre a try?
Yeah, I think for me, it really is escapism. Like
brain candy. This is my
it really is. But like you also don't have to feel like it's total fluff, because I feel like most authors really do, like you said, try to put in these nuggets, because really, if you can't build a true character, then how can you have a true romance? If you can't overcome things, how can you feel like your characters have grown? So I wouldn't say it's complete fluff, but it is definitely a turn off your brain. My book, A Proper Charade, did quite well, I think, this year, partially because it came out right during the middle of all the crazy pandemic stuff. And I just feel like people needed a break. Like some of my other books were more serious. This one is mostly just fun. Mm-hmm. And I think that is such a great reason to break open a wholesome romance and just escape for a
Do you feel like the genre has evolved? I feel like it's evolved into more thinking and less of the fluff and more where you can still escape, but you're also being challenged or you're thinking. Yeah. And the women are being portrayed in much more authentic ways to how women are strong and not helpless. Yeah. And I just love how the genre is evolving.
Yeah, it is. And I do feel like there's all kinds of writers. So I do think you're right about the women being stronger and not always being the ones saved all the time. But also I think if that is what you really want, you can find that too. So like the trick is just finding an author that writes the way you want to read. And that's definitely something I've learned as an author too. It's my job to find readers who want to read what I write.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I love, to your point, I think that's true. And this passage, I think, speaks to that. But so often as we're developing, there are things that we have to learn in order for a relationship to work. And there are things that we have to kind of like challenge or go through or whatever in our own personal lives. And yet sometimes I think, okay, where is the romance book for the married women? Okay. Where is that book for the married women and not just the ones who are finding love for the very first time, because I still feel like I'm developing. So, but my point in that is just a little bit of jest, but also the reminder that we can follow along with these people, but there are little nuggets we can pull out. I love that she says to him, yes, you can be both because you're human. And there are some profound lessons in that too, of allowing ourselves to change.
Yeah.
And so as you're thinking about character development, how do you think about helping a character change and grow that we can also glean from in our own lives?
I think every romance book will have a nugget like that in it that will you'll read that little section and you'll go like, oh, that's something I can work on in my life. And I think romance authors are actually particularly good at this because the characters are their story. And so I feel like they actually do always start out with something they need to learn, something they need to grow in. And so I think if you're looking for those kinds of nuggets, you'll find them in a romance novel. And the job of the author is to put them in there in a natural way that speaks to the reader. And I think that's kind of the trick.
So I know that there are going to be women listening to or watching this who are listening to your whole story and listening to the process, and they're very excited at the prospect of writing themselves. Women's stories are really, really important, whether they're fiction, whether they're nonfiction, but 87% of people, when polled, say that they have a book inside of them.
Yeah.
So only 3% of that 87 go on to actually write it.
Yeah.
So what do you say to the women out there who really have this burning desire in them to share their story?
So first of all, I would say there's no one path. There is no one path to this. I feel like my story is so unique to all the other authors because I was a reader first and then became a writer. But then I meet other people like me too. But so wherever you're at is a great place to start because nobody has to do it the same way. And I've known multiple writers now that have learned different ways. For me, writing conferences were huge. Like they were very helpful. You don't have to have written a single thing to go. But you can also find a lot of the same classes online if that's something you are not comfortable doing. Reading books, there are tons of books on writing. But I will say this, it is a learning process. If you've never opened up a book about how to write and you want to write, it will be hard. And so I would say two things. One, learn in whatever capacity works best for you. Yeah. And two, write. Because
every day.
I mean, almost every day. Like make a goal, whatever that looks like for you, if it's every day or 3 times a week when kids are at preschool or something, and write during that time and be consistent. The only books that don't get written are the ones that people stop writing on.
Right.
So
I like to say the only qualification to be a writer is to write. So if you want to call yourself a writer, just sit down
This is true.
and put your fingers on the keyboard or put your pen to the paper and just write, and suddenly you're a writer.
Yeah.
How important has community been to you in your writing journey?
It has been amazingly important. At the beginning, I guess, because that's why I started, is to be a part of that writing group. So for me, it's been a huge part. And now as I've been writing in this specific genre, I have friends that write similar things. And I'm like on a deadline, like I've talked about. And sometimes all the research gets in the way. And so I have this large group of friends that I can just say, hey, can you remind me what would be like a Regency or Victorian word for this? And I get 6 answers like that. And there's so many things that are super nice about having a community. And just like when the hard times start coming, because it often is fun at the beginning and then turns hard.
Yes.
You have a group of authors that can say, I remember when I felt that way. I remember when I hated my book and now I love it. So community has been super important, but you don't have to start with one. That can grow over time.
And you can make one on your own.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
On a similar note, how does your faith and your connection with God help you in your writing and help you through that process and help you develop that talent?
I feel like because of how I started, it's pretty important. I feel kind of called to write, which I think some people would look at like, this book, a Victorian romance, and be like, you felt called to write this?
With that cover, I feel called to write it too. It's so pretty.
I know. But I feel like for me, it's something Heavenly Father wanted me to do to find myself again. But also now that I'm in it, I think it's been an amazing thing for connection, like you've said, for myself and for others. And I'm surprised by some of the words that I write, and that's kind of like a great blessing, right? I didn't know what you were going to read today, but when you started, I remember thinking like I was inspired. I was inspired for a moment, and what a blessing to have a career where inspiration is part of it every day.
I love that, because what it tells the people listening and watching is that no matter what you do and no matter who you are, you can be inspired. And you can use your gifts and talents and abilities to lift the world and to share important messages. I love how you describe that feeling of flow and receiving this inspiration to write. Yeah. And who would have known? We need romance in our lives. Yeah. It's a way that we can use to bring people to Christ. Yeah. So if that's true, if you can write a romance novel that brings people to Christ, can't we do anything in our lives and use it to bring people to Christ?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Well, Esther, thank you so much for being with us. We ask all of our guests to share a piece of advice with our audience, and we would love for you to do the same. If you could give one piece of advice about how to go and be in this world, what would it be?
I would say, don't be scared. I think bravery is something I've been trying to learn a lot about lately, because I am, at my core, a little bit of an afraid person. I'm afraid of what people are thinking about me. I'm afraid of making mistakes. But it's like being on a dance floor, which I love to dance, and you make that realization that no one's watching you. Like you are just you. And I would say, be brave, be true to yourself, do the things that you're scared to sometimes, if they're things that you really want. And that would be my advice. Yeah.
That is so beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've been pleased to have Esther here, and we hope that you go into the world and be a person who is brave. Go into the world and seek out your dreams. Be willing to do what it takes to get what you want in this world. Just go and be.
Sweet Salt. Save 15% at Seagull Book and SweetSaltClothing.com.